Wood doesn't forgive mistakes. Cut it wrong, dry it fast, rush the process, and it twists, cracks, or rots from the inside out. Medieval builders learned this the hard way. After centuries of trial, error, collapsed roofs, warped doors, and ruined ships, they perfected a wood kilning technique so reliable that entire cathedrals, bridges, and warships still stand because of it. And here's the part that should stop you cold. They did it without electricity, without thermometers, and without modern science. Just fire, airflow, patience, and brutal discipline. This wasn't guesswork. It was engineered survival. Why medieval builders feared wet wood. Freshly cut timber is heavy, unstable, and dangerous to build with. Moisture trapped inside the wood cells slowly escapes over time, shrinking the timber unevenly. That shrinkage causes warping, splitting, and structural weakness. Medieval carpenters knew that a beam could look solid on day one and fail years later if dried improperly. For a world that relied on wood for homes, tools, carts, ships, weapons, and heating, failure wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Air drying helped, but it was slow, years slow. In wet climates, it often failed entirely. Fungal rot, insects, and internal stress ruined stock before it ever reached a worksite. Builders needed a way to dry wood faster without destroying it. That's where kilning came in. The medieval kiln was not about heat. This is where modern assumptions break. Medieval wood kilns were not designed to cook timber. They were designed to persuade moisture to leave gently, evenly, and permanently. The core idea was controlled warmth paired with constant airflow. Heat alone cracks wood. Airflow alone takes too long. Combined correctly, they create stable, durable timber that behaves predictably. Medieval kilns were usually built as long, low stone or earth structures. Think of a tunnel rather than an oven. A firebox sat at one end, vented so flames never touched the wood. The timber was stacked along the length of the chamber with precise spacing. Small vents along the walls and roof regulated air movement. The temperature stayed low, often no hotter than a hot summer day. The goal was evaporation, not combustion. This slow, steady environment allowed moisture to migrate from the center of the wood outward without shocking the grain. Here's the clever part. Most modern summaries miss. Medieval kiln drying wasn't just about removing water. It was about controlling internal stress. As wood dries, the outer layers shrink first. If the core stays wet too long, it pushes outward and causes cracks. Medieval kiln masters managed this by cycling heat and airflow. They didn't run the kiln constantly. Fires were lit and extinguished in deliberate patterns. Heat rose gently, then dropped. Airflow increased, then slowed. This rhythm allowed the outer layers to relax while the core caught up. In some regions, especially Northern Europe, kilns ran for weeks, not days. Oak beams for ships and cathedrals might spend months in a kiln, rotated and restacked multiple times. This process produced timber that was internally balanced. No hidden stress, no surprise failures. Builders trusted it because it worked. Medieval kilning succeeded because it respected the material. Wood is a living structure even after the tree is cut. Its fibers respond to pressure, temperature, and moisture in predictable ways. The kiln created a stable microclimate. Rain couldn't reach the wood. Sun couldn't overheat it. Wind couldn't dry one side faster than the other. Everything was controlled. More importantly, the process was supervised by experienced craftsmen. Kiln masters learned to read wood by sound, smell, and touch. A dull thud meant moisture remained. A sharp ring meant readiness. The scent of sap told them when resin was still active. No gauges, no screens, just knowledge passed down through generations. That human judgment is why the system rarely failed. When something felt wrong, they adjusted immediately. This wasn't just for grand buildings. Kiln-dried wood mattered at every level of medieval survival. Weapons needed stable shafts that wouldn't warp in damp weather. Wagon wheels required spokes that held their shape under stress. Doors had to close in winter and summer. Ships needed planks that could flex with waves without splitting. Kiln-dried timber solved all of it. For survival-focused communities, this meant fewer repairs, less waste, and longer-lasting tools. Wood was hard to harvest and transport. Ruining it through bad drying was unacceptable. The kiln turned a risky resource into a reliable one. Across medieval Europe and parts of Asia, the details varied, but the principles stayed the same. In colder regions, kilns were partially buried to retain heat. In wetter climates, ventilation was more aggressive. In forest-rich areas, kilns were permanent stone structures. In frontier zones, they were temporary earthworks lined with clay. Some cultures used charcoal instead of raw wood to keep temperatures low and consistent. Others burned peat. The fuel didn't matter as much as control. What united all of them was restraint. No rushing, no overheating, no shortcuts. Why modern builders lost this knowledge? Industrial kilns changed everything. Steam, high heat, and forced drying cut time dramatically. Lumber could be processed in days instead of months, but speed came at a cost. Modern kiln-dried wood is efficient, but it's often stressed internally. That's why boards twist after installation, why cracks appear months later, why reclaimed old-growth timber is so prized today. The medieval method wasn't optimized for profit. It was optimized for permanence. That's why beams cut 800 years ago still support roofs today. If you work with wood, build shelters, or think about long-term survival, this technique matters. Slow drying produces stronger material. Controlled airflow prevents warping. Even heat reduces internal stress. And patience saves resources. You don't need a medieval stone kiln to apply these lessons. Shaded drying, raised stacking, covered airflow, and gentle warmth all echo the same principles. The old builders weren't primitive. They were precise. They just understood that wood, like survival itself, rewards those who don't rush. This technique didn't survive because it was written down. It survived because it worked. Structures lasted. Tools held up. Lives depended on it. In a world without backups, reliability was everything. And that's the quiet brilliance of medieval wood kilning. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it never failed when done with respect for the material. That's the kind of knowledge worth remembering. If you want more forgotten techniques like this, methods that built civilizations long before modern technology stepped in, make sure you're subscribed to Legacy of Survival. Like the video, if this opened your eyes, share it with someone who appreciates real craftsmanship and stay with us. There's a lot more history that still knows how to keep us alive.